Right, we're right at about 11:30, so I'd like to go ahead and get started. So my name is Katie Carnival, and welcome to my session, Engaging Generation Z in the College Classroom. I'm really excited to be here. This is initial research that I've done for my dissertation, and was prompted and inspired by some situations and experiences I had in the classroom teaching. So to give you a little bit of background about myself, I am currently a media and communications instructor at Delaware Valley University, which is in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. And I also am an adjunct communications instructor at Bucks County Community College. So those are my two current hats that I wear, along with being a higher education EDD student at Immaculata. This is through a cohort with Bucks County Community College. I'm about a year into the program. If you love higher education, if you have been thinking about getting your doctorate, if you live in close proximity to either Immaculata or Bucks, I highly recommend this program. I'm happy to answer any and all questions you may have about it. It really has been a big stepping stone for me. So, like I said, my initial research for my dissertation centers around Generation Z. That came from more than 14 years of teaching as an adjunct. And so if you are an adjunct and you are wanting to get into higher education full time, I feel your pain. That was me for many, many, many years. It was something that I refused to give up on. And I'm finally happy to say that I'm a full-time faculty member. But there was a big difference, a big pivot in my career when I came to Del Val. For the 14 years prior to that, I had been an adjunct mostly at community colleges teaching adult learners. And I know Dr. DeRosa said they're all adult learners, but when I say adult learners, I mean students who are millennials, more around my age, or perhaps even older than I am. And suddenly I was thrust into this environment where there was a completely new generation that I had never really taught before. And there were so many pains and growing pains and things that I needed to get used to. So that's what caused me to take a deeper dive into Generation Z to figure out who are these kids and what are they looking for in higher education, and all these little intricacies about that. So I'm curious as to who's in my audience right now. So I am going to ask you to take a poll, and I'm going to do this a couple of different ways if this program allows me to. So this is one of the things that you can incorporate into your classes that can be done ahead of time. So you can set up a poll ahead of time. You can have one made right when you're in class for something that you're covering that day. So this is completely anonymous. Nobody is ever going to see what your answer is, but I am curious as to what the makeup is of our audience here today. So this poll asks the question, or is a fill in the blank. I am a proud member of Generation fill in the blank. So you are going to, if you wouldn't mind, and if you're able to, create a new text message, so a new blank text message on your phone, like this. In the to area, that's who you're texting to. That's going to be the numbers 37607. So as you see right here. So that's who you're texting to. And if you've done one of these before, it's possible that you have this saved into your phone. So that's in the to area. The message that you are sending to this recipient is Generation Z, all one word, and the numbers 749. So this should opt you into our poll here. I got a response. You've joined Generation Z's session. When you're done, reply leave. So right into the text box again in your message area, you can put A, B, C, D, E, or F. So everything from the traditionalist generation of 1925 to 1945, the baby boomers of 1946 to 1964, generations X, Y, and Z, and I gave another option, none of your business, which you can certainly opt into if you wish. All right, so it's looking like exactly what I anticipated the results to be, that these three generations would show pretty heavy. Now, this means that there are three generations teaching this brand new to higher education generation, Generation Z. We're going to get to know a little bit more about who they are. But before I do that, and I want to let you know that this is something that you can do in your classes. You can tell your students, hey, take out your smartphones. We're going to take a poll, and they might go into shock because you're telling them that they can use their phones. You can also do it a different way. You can push out the link. Because I don't have access to the chat box when I'm sharing my screen, that's the only reason I didn't do that. But you can also take this link, push it out into an email. You can put it on a Blackboard post. You can do it a number of different ways in case your students don't have smartphones or that capability, or you don't want to bring the idea of smartphones into your classes. All right, so 46% of our audience members today are baby boomers, so just about half. 42% from Generation X, 1965 to 1980, and then 12% Generation Y, 1981 to 1996. So like I said, this is one of the first times in history that we have four generations side by side in higher education. So there's a big wealth of knowledge, a lot of experience coming into college classrooms, teaching this brand new generation. So let's talk about those generations and what some of the hallmarks are of each. So if you are a baby boomer, as you stated in your poll response, you might have some of the following characteristics or recognize them in those of your generation. Currently, you make up about 44% of the labor force. So although we're seeing some baby boomers retire, a lot of them are still working, and they still make up the lion's share of the workforce. They are considered to be loyal employees. So in thinking of yourself, if you're a baby boomer, or those who you know, many probably have worked at the same company their entire lives, or just a couple of different companies, and haven't done a ton of job hopping like other generations that we're going to talk about shortly. There is this idea that baby boomers struggle with technology simply because they weren't raised with it. I think that this is a misnomer, especially for those in higher education. I think that there has been that level of adaptation for baby boomers who have emerged in their career throughout higher education because there was a need for technology. So my goal today is to give you some things that you can incorporate into your own teaching that can help you sort of meet Generation Z where they are. So let's continue with our other generations. Generation X, 1965 to 1980. Some of the hallmarks of this generation, they strive for and desire a work-life balance. Who doesn't, right? But especially Generation X, especially in this pandemic where we're seeing folks like myself and some of you, I'm sure, who have children at home that you're educating, that you're homeschooling while you're working and teaching your classes, and maybe you're even going to school as well. This is something that Generation X has always strived for. They also embrace feedback. They want feedback, they need feedback, they're motivated by feedback. So it's important that they get that from their superiors. They have a hybrid relationship with technology. It came into their lives, the digital age in the late 90s, came into their lives sort of in their adulthood. So for some, it was that they had technology in high school and college. For some, they didn't have any of that in high school and college. So it really depends on at what point they became adults within that time period. Generation Y, those millennials that we hear so much about taking over the workforce, they have a few characteristics that are unique to them as well. They're ambitious and result-oriented. They like working on projects where there's a production or a piece at the end, something tangible that they can see. They're tech savvy because they are natives to technology. They were born into the digital age, so they're very comfortable with it. And they're also known to seek new challenges. So millennials are known, whereas the baby boomers are known to be job loyal, the millennials are known to be job hoppers, and I know many of them, and they get bored easily. They look for new challenges. Once they feel as though they have fulfilled all that they can fulfill at a position in a job, they're looking for a new opportunity. Not to say that that's a bad thing. It's just something that's a little bit different from the generations that preceded them. And
Hi,
then
Katie. Could there be a way we could see the rest of your screen? I'm
you're
not
not
able to see
seeing,
your right side of your screen. The chat
oh,
box, I tried to minimize and it takes the whole thing down. Thank you.
maybe I can minimize it
It's probably your slider to your left that you can adjust.
I will try that. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
I
I
can
will.
see your whole screen, so I think it might be her slider in particular.
Oh, okay. All right. So there's a toggle towards the bottom where you can do the screen size then. Okay, try that out if anybody else is having issues with that as well. So then that brings us to Generation Z. And according to my research, I take this from the Pew Research Institute. So these are the generation breakdowns that they use. So Generation Z are people who were born between 1997 and 2012. So they've only been in higher education for a few years. We're graduating our first few members of Generation Z in higher education. They are known for their ability to multitask. If you have a teenager at home or you have senior students in action in the classroom, you know that they can be on a laptop, a tablet, a phone, playing video games, having a conversation with headphones on. So it's really, really a skill, but at the cost of other things, which we'll talk about. They're also known for being entrepreneurial. They want to work for themselves. They want to create these new opportunities for themselves. So when you hear about influencers and you hear about people who are young of this generation and they have their own YouTube channel and they're starting their own businesses, it's because that entrepreneurial mindset is really present in Generation Z and they see others doing it and they want to replicate that themselves. They have great interaction with technology. They are connected to it all day, every day. With that comes a component of human interaction. So of course we're communicating with people when we're texting, when we're on social media, when we're playing video games. But that face-to-face communication, that is kind of what's lost in all of this because of all of the technology. So we'll talk about ways to incorporate both of those into the classroom. All right, one more thing, if you would humor me, please. We're going to create a word cloud. So I've told you a few of the characteristics or the attributes that are well known about Generation Z, but I want to know what your perception of Generation Z is. I know what my own perception was at the beginning, and it wasn't necessarily a positive outlook. If you have the same outlook, I'm hoping that I can turn the tide for you like I did for myself. But as of right now, with the Generation Z students that you've taught or those that you know in your own life, I would like you to participate in a word cloud. So with this word cloud, this works very similar to what we just did with the poll. And I'm sure you've seen word clouds before. So this is a word cloud about word clouds in the shape of a butterfly, but you can do it for almost anything. You can incorporate these into your classroom on almost any subject area. Let me find. And I will give you all of the information about Poll Everywhere and other web-based programs that I will reference during this presentation. So there is a limit, I believe, with my free version that I have. I have not upped to the upgraded version as of yet. I may be so moved to do so after this. But if you could keep your responses to just one word or one short phrase, like a couple of words. So the same process that you went through before, you are going to text Generation Z 749 to 37607, and you are going to type in your couple of words or your word that you think characterizes Generation Z in your own opinion. Great. Absolutely, yes. Attention span. I'm seeing entitled a couple of times in there. Tenacious, slacker, anxious, prefer digital, disrespect. screens. So entitled and distracted are coming to the forefront here. They are showing bigger. And the reason is that more than one person or a few people are typing in those same words. So anything that does that will immediately get more space in the word cloud that you are creating. So no matter what your discipline is, no matter what your field is, you can have your students create a word cloud. Let's say there's a concept that you're working on, or there's a famous figure in your field and you just read about this person and you want a gathering of characteristics of that person. Then you could use this word cloud within your own classroom. Easy to set up, easy to use, lets them use their phone, even if just for a couple of minutes. But I think you guys did a really good job with this. You could let me know if you had any technical issues with it in the chat box, but like I said, I don't have easy access to that until I stop sharing my screen. So thank you for participating in that. Nothing that you said comes as a surprise to me. I had many of those same feelings. Some of those are still lingering, but once I started to really dive into who Generation Z is, I kind of understood why they are the way that they are. So let's shift a little bit to more specifically Generation Z in college. So what are they looking for out of their higher education experience that's maybe a little bit different from the millennials that preceded them? The first is, and I don't know if you've heard this term thrown around yet, but an a la carte education. I have a young woman who is in my online public speaking class through Bucks, and in her intro video to introduce herself to her classmates, she said that she was taking this class during the summer, but was part of a new program, a new arts program through Penn State, where she basically had a credit count that she needed to achieve, but she could choose any classes that she wanted. It wasn't that she had to declare a major. She didn't have to have a certain track. There wasn't a core element to it. We're seeing some of these things come into question within higher education, and there are all different schools of belief on it. But I'm letting you know that this is something that higher education is having to deal with and contend with as Generation Z flows through. They're looking for ways to be creative. They want to produce. They want ways to use their creative abilities and their own talents and abilities in the classroom and throughout their higher education to help them on their path to their career. They're tech savvy. We know this. It's not a surprise at all. They use technology all day long. It's hard for them to disconnect when they come into a classroom, right? I don't know what your cell phone policies are like. I have had trouble handling the smartphone issues in the classroom. I've taken to just kind of calling people out and embarrassing them if they are on their cell phone, and that seems to do the trick. But I do have a no smartphone policy unless we're using it in class for a certain reason. So I'm trying to adapt technology into the classroom a little bit more so there won't be that temptation to pull out their phones, because they know that although they have an extreme addiction to this, they'll be able to use it at some point during the class. On demand, they are dubbed the instant generation. So if you ever hear the instant generation, they are talking about Generation Z. They are a generation that can Google something, look up YouTube, find the answer to something immediately. And while there's a certain positive aspect to that, there's also no delayed gratification or delayed learning that's going on. So I challenge you to incorporate something into your class that they have to sit on, they have to think about. There's no clear-cut answer, maybe a case study or something that really uses their critical thinking skills and delays that ability to have that firm final answer that they're looking for, that they're so used to getting. And hands-on learning. I work at an institution, Delaware Valley University, that has a fantastic E360 program. That's what it's called, Experience 360. It starts as soon as somebody enters Del Val. There's a two-class part session that you take, one in your first semester, one in your second semester. It introduces you to career exploration. You develop resumes. You do all kinds of self-exploration. And then it flows into an internship and other opportunities. But it's something that you're doing from the day that you step into Del Val until the day that you leave. And it's a really wonderful program. And Del Val really encourages faculty members to include that kind of experiential learning and that hands-on learning in their own classroom. Del Val itself was founded as an experiential learning school. So they were founded nearly 125 years ago as the National Farm School. And what that entailed was a two-part curriculum. One part you were working out in the farms, and the other part you were doing, in classroom schoolwork. So the fundamentals of that have flown through for the last 125 years, and something that Del Val really does a nice job of. I found this really intriguing infographic through Pearson about meeting the expectations of Gen Z in higher education. So I wanted to point out a couple of different aspects in the ways that Gen Z is like millennials and differs from millennials. So 54% of Gen Z says that technology can greatly enhance the college learning experience. That's not really surprising. 59% say that technology can transform the way college students learn in the future. So they see it, they want it in the classroom. This pay important attention to. 78% of Generation Z thinks their teachers are very or extremely important to their learning and development. So that's kudos to you, to everybody in higher education, those faculty members that are in the classrooms with this generation. They see the value of you being there. It may just be that there's a disconnect that we need to connect with technology and other things. One other thing that I wanted to point out on this is that 57% of Gen Z prefers in-class activities with classmates. I would say that excuse me, might even go up after this pandemic, right? They're missing each other. They're wanting to be in the classroom and doing things together, not just, Zoom calls and whatnot. And a few other things, 47% of Gen Z spends 3 hours or more on YouTube. We're going to talk about YouTube and incorporating the use of videos. And 47% of Gen Z likes to use interactive learning apps or games to learn. So almost half in a poll would like to incorporate apps, games, etc. into the classroom. So this is something that they are looking for. So the first set of ideas that I'm going to share with you are ways that you can establish a classroom culture that really lends itself to engagement. And that starts even before you have your first class. So let's talk about some things that you can incorporate into the syllabus. So before you even meet, I think you should have a syllabus that goes beyond just the contact information, lesson and assignment schedules, and a grading scale. Those are kind of the basics that should be on there. Certainly you have your office hours listed, but a colleague of mine a few weeks back said she actually requires her students to visit at least 1 or 2 times during the semester, even if she's not advising them, to check in about this specific class, so their progress in this class. It's really important to have those touch points. We all have those students that can fall through the cracks, the ones that sit in the back that don't participate. Maybe they have attendance issues. Maybe they don't turn in good work. Maybe their work is late or not turned in at all. This gives you an appointment with them that they are required to do as part of their grade, that you can really check in with them and show that you care and you want them to succeed. I think that's important to relay to them. I would also encourage you to incorporate your school resources as much as possible. My institution, Del Val, has a fantastic writing center, and so much of my media and communications classes have writing pieces. So it's research papers and it's news articles and all different kinds of written pieces. And you know that writing abilities of college students can vary greatly. So I make it a requirement that they make an appointment with the writing center to look over their work, to review it before they submit it to me. Because so many of them will just read their paper but never have another set of eyes look at it. And you and I all know that we can miss our own mistakes very easily if we're the only set of eyes to look at something. So I encourage students to get out and sort of use these resources as much as possible, going way beyond what's just being done in the classroom. When it comes to textbooks, if you were in Dr. DeRosa's keynote address this morning, she talked about OERs, open education resources, that are available for free or very low cost. I encourage you to at least look into this. It's not possible with every single class, and it's not appropriate for every single class, but if you can find a way to make your class materials be more affordable for your students, they're going to very much appreciate that. We've all had students who simply can't afford the textbook. There was a student who was borrowing a copy from me during class time, And then when the pandemic happened, I was sending him some pictures of some of the pages so he could complete the assignments. He just simply could not afford the textbook. So we know that there are situations like this. If we can make the textbooks and the materials affordable and accessible, that's really going to help our students. And I don't know if you've ever seen cartoons like this, but whether your syllabus is 2 pages or 20 pages, you try to have it full of as much information and anticipating any questions that your students might have, everything from what was covered in class, what's your late work policy, when are your office hours, how is my grade computed, and still we get the same questions semester to semester. The next thing is that first day of class, that very important first day of class. I think it's so crucial to have a strong start. So having this idea of jumping right into the material is something that I want you to pull back on if possible. You might require that they read a chapter or two before you start class, but I would suggest instead starting off with an icebreaker or some type of introduction. What I do, and I tend to have smaller classes, so I understand those of you who teach larger lecture halls may not have this opportunity, but I pair up my students and each one of them makes a buddy on the first day. And they interview or have a conversation with this person for just a few minutes. And their job is to make that person that they're going to introduce to me and to the class be as memorable as possible. So they need to pull out information, unique information, characteristics, fun facts about this person so that I can try to remember their name. So I'll remember that Jody is, a semi-professional skier or something like that because of the information that this other person was able to get from them. I may never know that about Jody if, Tom hadn't brought that to my attention. So in essence, they meet a buddy, they meet somebody, a confidant or compadre in the classroom, if you will, they can reach out to, exchange contact information with, if something comes up in class. And then it serves as a nice way for us all to learn a little bit more about each other on that first day and find out things that we have in common. I'm not going to click on this, but I will include a link to this entire presentation where you can access this link. And this link will give you some good icebreakers for classrooms of all different sizes. One other thing that I do, and this is more for my information, is I create a profile sheet. And it's a piece of paper and it has different questions and categories that each student fills out. So I can get to know them a little bit more, but they are free to share any information with me that they may not want to in person, that they may not want to during these introductions, that they may not even want to do over email. I also use this as an opportunity to figure out and to find out if everybody has a smartphone. I don't want to do a word cloud or a poll if I find out that a student or two don't have a smartphone. I would never want anybody to feel embarrassed or, left out because of something like that. With the profile sheet, I'm able to have that information. I'm armed with that information before I even try to incorporate anything like that. So you can ask if they have smartphones, if they have laptops, if they have tablets, etc., whatever you plan to incorporate. In class and group work. So group work. They said that they like to work with each other, right? So that should mean that they want to do group work. That's not necessarily the case. I found this out the hard way in my very first semester at Del Val. Middle of the semester, group project time in Intro to Communication. Put them all together in groups. They're developing Shark Tank ideas that would be beneficial to college students, and then they're creating a presentation and a paper for it. It's a fun activity. Usually my students love it, but they hadn't worked together in any other way until that point, and it felt very awkward, it felt very forced, and they weren't as into it as they would have been had I introduced the idea of group work much earlier in the semester. So I learned this past semester that I'm going to do group work early and often. So, almost every day I'm putting them in pairs or small groups to discuss something, some concept or question that comes up during class. Sometimes I have them do a short little presentation. Sometimes they're taking it outside of the classroom and finishing it up. Ways that you can mix it up where they're doing group work that's not necessarily a huge project. If you have a big project, work up to it with these smaller ones. I think you'll definitely see the benefits of that. Another thing I made sure to do was incorporate in-class assignments. This is a way to connect the material, as you know, I'm sure you do in class assignments as well. I do writing assignments, group assignments, discussion board, but I assign them a point value. So my students will know that there's 10 or there's 15 different in-class assignments, whether that be a writing assignment, whether that be a discussion board, whether that be a short little presentation, whether that be a video that they're sharing, and each has a point value. If you're absent on that day, sorry, you don't get those points. So it really encourages better attendance and better engagement. And I don't tell them this at the beginning of the semester, but I do offer an extra credit opportunity towards the end where they're able to make up some of those points if in fact they did have a couple of absences. But I can tell you, for me, for all the classes that I taught this past semester, it really increased my attendance and engagement rates. Another thing I do are discussions, of course, related to case studies and articles. So I go outside of the textbook and, send them links and have them read something prior to class that we discussed in class. Textbook review, of course, I'm sure we all do this. But another way that I incorporate reading and discussions into the class is what I call book club. I started my own book club about 5 years ago with a bunch of my different friends in different social circles, and it has been an amazing experience. We each choose a month, and we choose the book and the restaurant for that month. And we haven't met in a couple of months, so we're kind of missing each other. But I wanted to sort of replicate that in my classroom. So what I did was find a book, and these are a couple of the books that are related to the topic or the material or the industry or whatever. So this was for my sports media class, and this was for my social media class. And these are books that I have them purchase or borrow from a library or download on Kindle. They have a couple of weeks to read it, but they're also required to bring talking points and questions to our group book club discussion. I arrange the desks or the chairs in a circle so it feels like a true book club. Everybody brings their coffee or their beverage of choice, non-alcoholic, of course, and we spend some time discussing this book. And everybody has to make a contribution to the discussion, and I have a checklist. As I hear from everybody, I check your name off. In addition to that, they write a review of the book, and the review serves as a graded, weighted assignment as well. So I put those two together, and I count this generally for 10% of their final grade, but it's something different. It's something different from the textbook. It's something different from the lectures. And then finally, for the classroom culture or establishing the classroom culture, engaging lectures. So there's a few different things that I do, and I'd love to hear your ideas as well. I always set goals and objectives for each lecture, and I always let my students know what the schedule is. I know that you had some tending towards negative words to describe Generation Z, and I totally get it. But I have found that they are a group that want to know what the expectations are, what the schedule is, what's going to happen, and when it's going to happen. And I have two kids that sort of speak to that as well, an almost 7th grader and an almost 2nd grader. And my almost 7th grader, who is a member of Generation Z, very much operates that way. He wants the schedule and he wants to know exactly how things are going to go. So I will share that with my students at the beginning of class. This is what we're going to do today. This is the in-class assignment, and this is the expectation. It's almost like writing your homework on the board in grade school, which I know some of you might consider to be hand-holding, but if it leads to better success, then I think it's worth it. Break up the material. So some of the things that I've given you, like the book club and the word cloud, paired with some of the other things that I'm going to give you that are more technological, are a great way to break up the material. So you're not standing up there lecturing for an hour and 15 minutes or 45 minutes or however long your classes are. You break it up into digestible chunks. Use PowerPoint, which I'm sure many of you do, Google Slides, which I'm sure many of you do, or try Prezi. That's the program I'm using right now, www.prezi.com. It adds a little bit of a different look and feel. My slides aren't too crowded with text or pictures or videos, but you can incorporate all of that stuff in, and it's just a different look and feel for your presentations. There is a 30-day free trial, so you can play around with it this summer, and if you like it, which I hope that you will, and I think that you will, you can sign up for the upgraded version, which will give you, I think, 12 months for $84. So just a few dollars a month. So you decide if you think that's worth it or not. And you can also try the technology tips to come. So I just want to stop there for a minute and check the chat box, check in with you guys. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, comments, anything at this point?
Katie, I asked a question
Okay.
about your book club. Did you
Yeah.
just try it at Del Val, or did you work it into your classes at Bucks?
I have not. Right now, I only teach online at Bucks, but I see no reason why it wouldn't work in any face-to-face class.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, since Del Val has, it's a four-year college, and
Mhm.
community college students are commuter students, and they're working more than maybe the Del Val student. So I was just wondering.
I would say give it a try. There's no harm in trying that, right? Pick a book that's intriguing to you, that you think that they would enjoy, that connects to the material, and I really think that you'll get a positive response. I think it's kind of an old school thing that has kind of come back in recent years, right? With Oprah, Reese Witherspoon has her book club. So many of them are virtual nowadays. But I say give it a try. What do you teach? Oh, it's Stacy. Okay, so public speaking. I don't have one picked out for public speaking, but I'm on the hunt for one. So I'll be in touch with you if that comes up. All right, let me see. Are there any other questions? So somebody asked about a larger classroom. So I will share that link that has the opportunities for a larger crowd. It's kind of hokey, but it's things like, if you are an only child, come stand over here on this side of the room. If you are Sagittarius, you go stand on that side of the room. And it kind of just gets people to move around and shift and get to know each other. But I will share that link with this. Any other questions that I missed? Please speak up. I'm apologizing in advance for this.
Katie, it's Stacy again. I just had one other question.
Sure.
I like the idea. You mentioned that you have the check-in requirement for office hours, and I was just wondering, you mentioned your colleague has their students come in. Some semesters I'll have over 120 students. That's a lot of students to, have them come in and check in on top of my required advising. So I just was wondering, how many does your colleague have? How many do you have when you do this required check-in office hour?
Okay. So this isn't something I've put into practice yet. I admittedly have several fewer students than you do. My colleague that I'm referring to is a Bucks faculty member. She is in the STEM department. I think she has about the same load you do. So I'm not sure how best she manages or handles that, but it is something that she said that she has put into practice, and it has been really beneficial for retention.
Okay, that's interesting. Who is that? So I can reach out to that person.
Sure. So that's Millicent Heaney Stemple.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And it might be, she might suggest maybe you just do that for at-risk students. So it's something that you shoot an email to them and just say, hey, would love to check in with you. I actually did this through Zoom during this pandemic when I felt like a couple of students were falling through the cracks. I sent them an email and said, I just want to do a quick check-in, wanted to make sure that they were able to access all the information, they had the technology that they needed, and if there was any way that I could help them get through the class. And I think that was most appreciated by them, because it was so easy for students to just fall through the cracks. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Think. All right, are you able to see my presentation again?
Yes.
Great, thank you. All right, moving on from the classroom culture components, let's go through, I'll be quick about this because I know our time is running out here. A few of the things that I incorporate technology-wise into the classroom. So we already talked about word cloud and the polls. When you get a link to this presentation, you will have all the links to these. So Poll Everywhere is the program that I used. but I will move on from that in the interest of time. Another thing that I create is a Jeopardy review game for all of my midterms and finals in my classes. It's free, it's web-based, it's easy to create. I say free with a little asterisk because they let you create up to 3 games and then you have to start copying over those. So if you use them for all of your classes or there's ones that you definitely want to retain from semester to semester, you can pay a small fee. I think I paid $48 for the entire year for that one. If you have professional development money, perhaps that's something that you can use towards that. Reviewing material for tests and exams, like I said, there's 2 ways that you can play. You can put your students in groups in a classroom setting and have them work as a group to answer the questions, and you go group by group, or you can have them play solo using their smartphone. So there is a link that will generate that they will have to log in on their phone, and then they can use that as their buzzer to buzz in. So I've used both ways, and I will say that the group one worked better, and Generation Z is shockingly competitive. I also offer a few extra credit points for the winning team, and I also let them have 1 sheet of paper that they're allowed to use to take notes. I don't allow them to take pictures or screenshots of the game as it is going on, but sort of that seeing it, hearing it, and writing it helps them to retain a lot of that information. Another thing that I use is a program called SurveyMonkey. Once again, free, easy to use, www.surveymonkey.com. You can create an assignment that connects material with a way that your students can do some sort of general research on it. So I've used this in a couple of classes. I have them create a survey, then they share the link either with classmates or with external, family, friends. Social media is a great place for them to put their links on. Then they have to analyze the results and they report out on it either through a paper, a presentation, or both. I do this in my public speaking classes so that my students can gain insight into their audience's feelings on a persuasive topic or their knowledge of an informative topic ahead of time. This is what the survey system looks like. It's really easy to use. It's intuitive. It offers you examples and recommendations as you go along. And then reporting out, you have a dashboard and you get really nice results where you can see, in graphs, in numbers, and then also if you have any open-ended questions and what the responses were for that. Social media. They live on social media. We know this, right? And it's like a different one every year, and they're just accumulating them as they go. And us old folks are on Facebook. We know that. But they maintain Facebook so they can talk to grandmoms and aunts and parents. But they are pretty focused on their Instagram, their Snapchat, and now their TikTok. They live on social media. If there's a way that you can incorporate social media into your classroom, I say do it. You can create a class page or a group that they contribute to or they manage on their own. You can have them watch a film in class or at home and do some type of live tweeting, pull out some of the major points of something, tweet about it, tweet about current events. I meant to say Twitter at the beginning, adding Twitter in, because Twitter is where they get their news. They don't watch TV, they don't read newspapers, we know this. Twitter is where they get their news. You can have them create a professional social media page. This is something that we highly encourage in the media and communications major. Is we know you have all of these personal ones, but you probably aren't going to send those to prospective employers. But how about a Twitter page where you talk about and tweet about, sports, which is the field that you want to go into. You want to be a sports broadcaster, you want to be a sports writer. Well, let's see how you follow the sports industry and how you comment on it and how you push out content and create content for it. So that's another way that you can incorporate social media into your classes. Video. We saw before how much they love video. They watch videos all day long. They love YouTube. Influencers are the new, commercials and reviewers. That's where they get their information and figure out what they want to spend their disposable income on. You can create mini lessons and put them up on YouTube. You can have students create their own YouTube videos. You can have a class YouTube channel where everybody's contributing to it. related to one assignment or throughout the semester. You can do in-class research. So for example, in my PR and advertising class, we're always analyzing, different commercials and things. So they have to find a commercial that, went viral and was really successful, and maybe a commercial that completely flopped and cost way too much money for what the return on investment was. So that they need to find those examples in YouTube and then share them in front of the class as they talk us through it. So a little bit about Gen Z and their love of video. They watch about 60 videos a day. About 20 of those or so are on YouTube, Snapchat. This doesn't even factor in TikTok, which is pretty new and was not part of this specific one. And then my final tech tip that you can incorporate into the class are podcasts. So I'd love to hear in the chat if any of you guys are fans of podcasts. I was, renouncing podcasts a few months ago, saying this is never going to be what they think it's going to be. People listen to the radio, people listen to what they want to, they listen to music. And now I am a huge podcast fan. All of a sudden, just diving in a little bit, reading about it for a class. I'm teaching a podcasting and digital media class in the fall. I'm really excited about it. So I'm getting into this book now. But in my research, I'm listening to podcasts, true crime podcasts, and podcasts about Generation Z and higher education, and they're really, really fascinating. So they're here to stay at least for a little bit. You can assign students to listen to a podcast that's related to class material. So you find a podcast series, maybe you assign each student an episode of that, and then they need to talk about it, write a reflection, etc. You can have students create their own podcast plan. So whatever your discipline is, they need to create a podcast series for it. They need to name the series, an episode idea list, what some of their guests would be, and then, share that with the class. Or you can have them record a podcast episode. You see this, not really even fancy equipment, but microphones and headphones. You don't even need that. I had my students in my writing for TV, radio, and internet classes do one on their phones, and it worked out just fine. If you have the equipment and the ability, then, on your campus, then I would certainly seek that out and see if that is something that you can do. Oh, so those are all of my technical and classroom culture tips that I have to share with you today. I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate you joining me today. I've shared with you several ways that you can engage with Generation Z. You can establish and maintain a classroom culture that lends itself to technology and incorporating it in a bunch of different ways. It took me some time to adapt my teaching methods. I was a little bit stubborn. I wanted to stick with what had worked so well for so long with my adult learners, but I simply had to turn the tide. I had to open myself up to this new generation, stop judging them for who they are, but try to meet them where they are as far as classroom. I'm not saying that you have to abandon what has made you a successful instructor in the past, but use this opportunity, especially in light of having to go distance learning this spring, different ways that we can incorporate things into our class that would really lend themselves to the success of Generation Z. So I'll share this link to my presentation that has all of my other links, and I'm going to stop sharing for now and just see if there are any questions that I have missed. So Crystal, I'm with you. I never give an assignment without points. You are absolutely right. It is certainly an incentive for them to do that. I know I'm a little bit behind on these, so I apologize. Instead of meeting at an office, maybe a few minutes outside of a lecture hall for a few minutes, that's a great idea. I'm sure we're always a few minutes early for class anyway. No fee to create a class YouTube as far as I know. I have created one in the class. It was for my students who were in a public speaking class to post their speeches, and there was no cost involved with that. I love the podcast love. How do I manage students in my class who love social media and technology to those who are traditional baby boomer? Yes, that is something that I have not had to contend with. It is almost like two different worlds. my Bucks classes have been in general, Generation Z, and now my Del Val. When I was teaching at Mercer County Community College, where I was for 12 years, it was almost the complete opposite. I almost never had 18 to 22-year-olds. But when there was younger students working with older students, I certainly saw that there was a divide there. I think even if it takes having a conversation with those older students or showing them or sharing your own stories about how maybe you were not as apt to incorporate technology at first, sharing that part of yourself with them might get them to open up a little bit more to the possibility. I'm hoping. What else? YouTube account. Yes, that's how I operated the class YouTube account. I branded it as the public speaking class, and it was a single account. I gave everybody access to it so that they could upload to it. I'm sure there is a better, easier way, Steve. So I am going to look into that because I think there's certainly a better way around it. Let me put in a link to my presentation for you. And then I'm hopeful that the hosts of this will allow us to share that in another document as well, maybe a wrap-up document. But are there any other questions, comments, concerns, anything? All right, Chris.
Where did you just put that link? Because I'm not seeing it in the chat.
I didn't get it yet. My internet is stubborn. Let me I have to go into my Chrome to grab the link. So I will be right back. But if anybody else has any questions, feel free to verbalize them or put them in the chat. And there's one of my children now.
I'm just going to mention, if no one else has noticed, next to the chat box is 3 dots. If you click on those dots, it gives you the opportunity to download a transcript of the entire chat, if that would be helpful.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so I did just share. That's good information. I'm on my call still. Okay, does everybody see that link that says prezi.com/view? If you want to click on that and just make sure it works for you, it should bring you to exactly what you just saw.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Awesome. So that will stay live for as long as you need it or want it. I thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. Generation Z, just be patient with them. They do have a lot to offer. I know they can be frustrating at times, but they are our future. So we're educating them now. Thank you so much, everybody.